2 years ago, Russian commanders were convinced they were fighting soldiers in Ukrainian trenches. Their maps were covered in red and blue arrows. Victory was measured in tons of artillery and kilometers taken overnight. It was a war they understood. Metal against metal, man against man. Now, on the same front lines, something else is happening. And the terrifying part is that most of them don't even realize it until it's already over. Bullets still scream overhead. Drones still hunt the night sky like mechanical insects. Artillery still turns apartment blocks into dust. But underneath all of that, a different battle is running in complete silence. A battle for information. And in this war, your enemy can be a text message you sent yourself because you were too tired to be suspicious. It all starts with something that sounds trivial in the civilian world: internet. In eastern Ukraine, internet isn't a luxury, it's oxygen. Lose signal for 5 minutes, and a unit can lose contact with command, lose artillery coordinates, lose the drones circling overhead. Out here, without a connection, you're blind, deaf, and nobody's coming to pull you out. A single minute of radio silence in this war can mean the difference between holding a position and getting erased from the map. That's why one small satellite system became the backbone of Ukraine's entire operation. Starlink, a briefcase-sized terminal that drops internet from orbit straight into a muddy trench. When Russia knocked out Ukraine's communications infrastructure in the first weeks of the invasion, Starlink arrived like a breath when you're suffocating. Drone operators used it to hunt convoys rolling through the dark. Artillery units used it to correct fire in seconds instead of minutes. Field hospitals used it to send photos of burns and get instructions back from surgeons in Kyiv. Even evacuation trains kept running because the dispatchers could still talk to each other. If this kind of breakdown hits you, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next part. The problem is, a good weapon doesn't care who holds it. At first, Russia had no access. Starlink terminals were blocked inside Russian territory by design. But modern war doesn't stop at technical rules. Through black markets in Dubai, smuggling routes through Kazakhstan, and third-party networks operating out of Turkey, the devices started appearing on the Russian side. Slow at first, just a handful. Then, suddenly a flood. Throughout 2024 and into mid-2025, intelligence reports claimed thousands of units were active along the Russian front, hidden in pickup trucks, dug into forward positions, powered by scavenged generators. The effect was immediate and undeniable. Russian drones that used to miss their targets by 50 meters were suddenly locking on with brutal precision. Communication between battalions got faster. They started using the same real-time maps Ukraine was using, seeing the same battlefield picture. For the first time since the invasion, the battlefield felt balanced. And for Ukraine, it was like playing chess against someone who could suddenly see your strategy notes. For months, this was the new normal. Both sides running on the same constellation of satellites, owned by a private American company, trying to kill each other while using the same internet connection. It was absurd, it was unstable, and it couldn't last. Then, without an announcement, without a press conference, the rules changed. Ukraine worked with SpaceX to roll out a new registration system. Every terminal that wanted to operate in the war zone had to pass verification. User identity, device serial, geofence location. For Ukrainian troops already registered through official channels, it was just annoying paperwork. For Russian units using illegal terminals bought on Telegram, it was a kill switch. Within days, hundreds of terminals on the Russian side went dark at the same time. One moment you had video feed from a reconnaissance drone, the next moment static. One moment your command post was talking to 3 companies, the next moment silence. Coordination that had taken weeks to build collapsed like a house of cards. On Russian military Telegram channels, the anger exploded. They called it digital betrayal. They called it sabotage. They called it everything except what it actually was. The inevitable consequence of relying on infrastructure you don't control. But anger doesn't bring the signal back, and desperation makes people do stupid things. And this is where the story stops being electronic warfare and becomes something older and crueler: deception. A small team of Ukrainian cyber operators saw the panic and didn't waste time. They didn't try to hack satellites. They didn't attack SpaceX servers. They did something simpler and far more dangerous. They pretended to be the solution. Posing as illegal middlemen, they started offering help in dark forums and Telegram groups. Can unblock Starlink. Fast, safe, no prepayment, send device number. For Russian soldiers cut off without comms, the offer sounded like a miracle. They were exhausted. They needed logistics coordinates. They needed extraction. They just needed to know if the unit next to them was still alive. So they sent the data. Device numbers, terminal details, screenshots, even crypto payments. The conversation started stiff and technical, just like any IT support chat. Then it slowly changed. The Ukrainian operators played the role with patience that would make a professional scammer jealous. They built trust, replying fast, sending fake confirmations, making the target feel like they were dealing with a technician who knew what he was doing and had done this 100 times before. They spoke the language. They used the right jargon. They complained about SpaceX updates and satellite handoffs. They made it feel real because it had to feel real. Because the second you feel like you're talking to a scammer, the whole operation dies. Until the final request came, and it sounded reasonable, logical even. To finish activation, we need precise GPS location. Send coordinates so the system can lock signal to your position. This is standard procedure. We can't activate you blind. And this is where military logic collapsed, because human logic took over. Many of them sent it. Bunker coordinates down to the meter, command post positions, locations of drone teams preparing to launch, assembly points for units that had arrived overnight. All sent voluntarily, not because they were hacked, but because they believed they were buying back the access to stay alive. When you've been without contact for 48 hours and your commander is screaming for a sitrep, you stop asking questions. If these reports are accurate, what happened next is one of the most efficient deception operations in modern war. The coordinates that came in were never used for activation. They were used for verification. Ukrainian FPV drones were sent to those points. If there was movement, engine heat, a blinking antenna, the target was locked. Within minutes, bunkers were hit. Command posts vanished. Drone teams that had just sent their own location were hunted before they could even pick up their controllers. Some never understood what happened. The last thing they saw was a small quadcopter with a camera hovering just long enough to confirm they were real. What makes this scheme insane isn't just the method, it's the scale. Ukrainian sources claim thousands of personnel got caught in the loop. That number is hard to verify independently, and it may be inflated for psychological effect. But even if only 10% is true, the impact is massive, because what died wasn't just soldiers. What died was trust in information itself. Think about what that means on a battlefield. Trust is everything. You trust the map. You trust the radio call. You trust that when your command says, "safe to move," it's actually safe. Break that trust, and the entire machine grinds to a halt. Units stop moving. Commanders stop giving orders. Everyone starts double-checking everything. And in a war moving at drone speed, hesitation gets you killed. This changes how you see the war in Ukraine. It's no longer just artillery and trenches. It's a war of digital manipulation. Psychological warfare fought in anonymous chat rooms. AI-driven deception that reads human behavior faster than humans can read a map. It's a war where the most valuable target isn't a tank. It's your belief. For the first time in modern military history, a soldier can die, not because the enemy found his tracks in the woods. He can die because he trusted a message from someone he never met. He dies because he wanted his internet back 5 minutes faster. He dies because he believed that the person on the other end of the chat was trying to help him, not kill him. Think about that for a second. The entire Russian military doctrine was built on the assumption that the battlefield is physical. That if you hide your antenna, move your command post every 6 hours, maintain comms discipline, you're safe. That doctrine was written for a war against NATO. It was written for a war against another army. It was never written for a war against a chatbot and a kid with a drone. That doctrine never accounted for desperation. It never calculated the risk of a single text message typed at 2 a.m. by a 22-year-old operator who hasn't slept in 3 days and just wants his family to know he's alive. It never accounted for the fact that in modern war, your weakest point isn't your armor, it's your hope. And that's the side of war that never makes it into military parade videos. Not the T-90 tanks rolling through Red Square, not the Su-35 jets doing flyovers, not the hypersonic Kinzhal missiles they claim can't be stopped. The most effective weapon now is a small notification on a phone screen, a chat from an account with no photo, a bot trained to sound like a tired technician who just wants to finish his shift. In the past, spies had to infiltrate barracks, bribe officers, steal documents. It took months. It took networks. It took risk. Now you just wait for the enemy to come to you, offer help, wait for them to believe. And when they send one line of coordinates, you've already won. The cost is almost nothing. The payoff is catastrophic. This is a new form of combat. No noise, invisible to satellites, nothing you can photograph for a magazine cover. But the effect is as lethal as a 152mm artillery strike. And because there's no explosion, nobody notices until the casualty list grows. There's no crater to analyze, no shrapnel to trace, just a dead radio and a team that stopped answering. What's more disturbing is what this means for future wars. If this can be done with Starlink, what happens when every military communication system has the same human vulnerability? What happens when AI can mimic your commander's voice well enough to make you open the bunker door? When deepfakes don't need video anymore, just a text message with perfect timing? When the system doesn't break the encryption, it breaks the person holding the device? Russia is now trapped in a brutal dilemma. Use illegal Starlink and risk this trap. Don't use it, and go back to analog radios that are easy to jam and slow as hell. Every choice has a price, and that price is paid in the field by people who never sat in the room when strategy was designed in Moscow. They're the ones paying for decisions made 1,000 kilometers away. Meanwhile, on the Ukrainian side, this story becomes both a lesson and a weapon. A lesson that technology without human discipline is a grave you dig yourself. A weapon that perception can be controlled. Because even if only a fraction of this is true, the effect has already spread. Now, every Russian soldier who gets a Starlink help message has to stop and ask, is this real? Or is this my last message? And that doubt alone is already a win. Because an army that doubts itself doesn't fight well. An army that doubts itself moves slow. And an army that moves slow dies fast in a war run by drones. So when people ask why the Ukraine war feels different from every war we've seen, the answer isn't in the number of drones or the caliber of artillery. The answer is in how information is weaponized, in how trust is turned into ammunition, in how a single text message, carefully typed by someone you've never met, can call death faster than a sniper's bullet. In modern war, the battlefield isn't land anymore. The battlefield is your mind. And once you start doubting every signal that comes in, you've already lost half the fight. The war isn't won by who has more tanks. It's won by who can make the other guy believe the wrong thing at the wrong time. The question now isn't whether this will happen again. It will. The question is, in the next war, who will realize first that the enemy doesn't need to storm your trench? They just need to get into your inbox. Because in the end, the most dangerous weapon isn't the one that explodes. It's the one that makes you betray yourself.